In the golden years after World War II, when America was rebuilding and reaching outward, a quiet revolution rolled across the highways. Air travel was still out of reach for most folks, and owning a car wasn't yet a given. But there was one way to see the country: reliable, affordable, and oddly comforting. That way had a name: the GM PD4104. It wasn't flashy, it didn't turn heads like the Scenicruiser, but for thousands of towns and millions of people, it was the face of freedom on four wheels. With its smooth ride, wraparound windows, and deep, low diesel hum, the 4104 became more than just a bus. It became a companion on the long road west, or home again. Nicknamed the Cadillac of the highway, it was the kind of machine you didn't brag about, but once you rode in one, you never forgot. And today, we're taking a ride back in time to rediscover why this unassuming workhorse still holds a place in the hearts of those who lived through its era, and why its story deserves to be told. It didn't look like a revolution, no wild curves, no futuristic flair, but the GM PD4104 quietly redefined what a bus could be. While other coaches still relied on heavy, rust-prone steel frames and bolted-on panels, the 4104 introduced something bold: a monocoque body, where the skin and skeleton were one. This wasn't just a new structure, it was a turning point. By shedding the traditional frame, the 4104 became lighter, sturdier, and far more resistant to corrosion. It didn't squeak or twist on rough highways, it glided. That solid, planted feel beneath your feet wasn't just your imagination, it was engineering done right. Every mile it ran quieter, smoother, and more efficiently than anything that came before. Maintenance teams praised it, drivers respected it, and passengers. Most never knew what made it different, but they could feel it. The design also opened the door for something just as important: style with purpose. Riveted aluminum panels, stainless steel trim, and a graceful side profile gave it a clean, timeless look. It wasn't trying to impress, it simply belonged. That wide beltline, the soft sweep of its windows, it all worked together, functional and beautiful without screaming for attention. Inside, that structural strength translated into space: more headroom, more luggage capacity, and better insulation against the noise and weather outside. You weren't just riding, you were traveling in comfort, with confidence. And that's the thing. The PD4104 wasn't built to chase trends. It was built to serve, to last. And it did. Many are still out there today, lovingly restored, rolling across America once again, this time as RVs, showpieces, or memory machines. Folks who know what they're looking at stop and smile, because they understand. This wasn't just a technical shift, it was a philosophical one. A bus built not for spectacle, but for the long haul, for the mechanic who'd be working under it, for the family in the fifth row with a cooler full of sandwiches, for the small-town depot where drivers swapped stories and wiped down the windshield before the next run. It may have looked plain to some, but to those who rode it, drove it, or trusted it, it was quietly perfect. But all that strength and grace would have meant little without the right heart beating in the back. And in the case of the GM PD4104, that heart was the legendary Detroit Diesel 671, a six-cylinder, two-stroke inline engine tucked neatly under the rear floor. It didn't roar, it rumbled, deep, steady, and sure. Rated at about 190 horsepower, it wasn't a speed demon by any means. But what it lacked in raw power, it more than made up for in reliability. This engine was built to run, and keep running. Mechanics loved it because it was simple, serviceable, and tough as nails. It could be rebuilt on the side of the road if you had to, and many were. With regular maintenance, the 671 could rack up hundreds of thousands of miles without missing a beat. And for bus lines that measured performance in decades, not weekends, that kind of dependability mattered. Of course, there was a catch: the transmission. The 4104th came with a 4-speed, non-synchronized manual gearbox, which meant you had to double-clutch every shift. Smooth driving took skill, real skill. A seasoned driver knew how to listen to the engine, feel the gears, and time the clutch just right. Done well, it was poetry. Done wrong, it was a jolt and a grind. But once you got the hang of it, it was like dancing with a machine that never missed a step. The connection between driver and diesel was real. You didn't just steer the 4104, you worked with it. You learned its rhythm. And in return, it rewarded you with consistency, confidence, and a sense of control that modern automatic buses just don't offer. The 671 and its paired gearbox turned the 4104 into a tool that demanded respect and gave back loyalty. In an age before onboard computers and electronic safety nets, this was a machine you had to know. And the folks who drove them, they still talk about it like it was a living thing. Because in a way, it was. Reliable, mechanical, human. A little noisy maybe, but always there when you needed it. And for a country on the move, that kind of trust was worth its weight in diesel. Of course, it wasn't just the driver who felt the difference. For the people riding inside, the GM PD4104 delivered an experience that, at the time, felt almost luxurious. This wasn't some creaky, drafty, bare-bones coach. This was something new, something bold. A highway cruiser, dressed up like a rolling hotel. Start with the seats, wide, well-cushioned, and wrapped in rugged upholstery designed to take years of wear without looking tired. They weren't crammed together either. You had space to stretch, to breathe, and above all, you had a view. Those big wraparound windows weren't just for show. They turned every mile into a moving postcard. Mountains, deserts, small towns, you didn't just pass through America, you saw it. Then came the air conditioning, a game changer. Most passengers in the 1950s had never felt true climate control on a bus. On summer routes through Texas or Arizona, that cool air felt like a miracle. It wasn't perfect. It could get a little uneven from front to back, but it was better than anything that came before, and it raised expectations across the industry. And yes, there was a restroom on board. No more counting miles between gas stations. No more hoping for a rest stop. For cross-country travelers, it meant peace of mind, especially for families and older riders. It made the journey feel more civilized, more humane. Little things added up too. The soft lighting, the overhead storage, the underfloor luggage bays that swallowed steamer trunks and suitcases with ease. This bus was designed to move people, but also to take care of them. It felt intentional, thoughtful, ahead of its time. For many Americans, the PD4104 offered something they'd never known before: the freedom to travel long distances in comfort, without needing a car or a plane ticket. You could visit relatives, chase work, or just go someplace new, with dignity. And whether you were a farmer heading to a wedding or a young couple eloping out west, the experience stayed with you. Because when you stepped aboard a 4104, you weren't just buying a ticket. You were getting a seat in a piece of progress, one that wrapped you in comfort, showed you the country, and reminded you that the journey itself could be part of the joy. Now, let's be clear. The GM PD4104 wasn't perfect. Like any machine built with purpose and character, it came with its quirks. And to appreciate just how great it was, you also have to understand where it fell short. The most talked about challenge? The transmission. That 4-speed manual box wasn't synchronized, which meant every shift had to be timed just right, with a technique called double clutching. If you didn't know what you were doing, you'd grind the gears, stall out, or miss your shift entirely. For rookie drivers, it could feel intimidating. But for the seasoned pros, it became second nature, almost like playing an instrument. You didn't just drive the 4104, you played it. Then, there was the Detroit Diesel 671 itself. Solid, durable, but not exactly fast. The 4104 wasn't built for racing off the line or climbing steep grades like a mountain goat. It was designed for steady, consistent, cross-country cruising. Put it on a highway, give it space to settle into its rhythm, and it would hum along for hundreds of miles without complaint. Just don't expect it to take off like a rocket or pass a semi uphill without some effort. That's the trade-off. GM didn't build this coach for drama. They built it for dependability. And if that meant sacrificing a little speed or ease of operation, it was a price worth paying. Because in return, you got a machine that was nearly impossible to kill. One that could rack up 500,000 miles before needing serious work. One that could survive weather, road salt, bad fuel, and rough hands, and still come back for more. To the average rider, these weaknesses were invisible. The ride was smooth. The bus looked clean and confident. But to the drivers and mechanics, it was a challenge that required skill, patience, and respect. And that's part of what made it special. It wasn't built to do all the work for you. It expected something in return. And in an era when machines still had personalities and demanded a bit of yours in exchange, that felt like a fair deal, maybe even a better one. Because when a vehicle gives you everything it has, all it asks is that you know how to listen. The real beauty of the GM PD4104, it didn't fade away. It endured. Between 1953 and 1960, General Motors built just over 5,000 units, a number that by today's standards might seem modest. But thanks to smart engineering, rugged simplicity, and a design built for the long haul, the 4104 didn't just survive its era, it outlived it. Even decades after Greyhound and Trailways moved on to newer models, a surprising number of 4104s kept rolling. And many didn't just end up in scrapyards, they were reborn. Across the country, these old coaches found new life as motorhomes. And not just a few. The 4104 became one of the most beloved donor platforms in the American RV community. Why? Because it was built like a tank, but rode like a dream. Its monocoque structure gave it strength without bulk. The rear engine setup made it easy to convert. And unlike modern buses loaded with electronics and computer controls, the 4104 ran on pure mechanics. Wires, gears, grease. Things a skilled hand could understand, fix, and trust. You'll still find them today on back roads, in national parks, tucked into RV rallies or vintage coach shows. Some are lovingly restored to original spec, complete with crisscross upholstery and classic paintwork. Others are wild customs, retrofitted with solar panels and hardwood floors. But whether it's stock or stylized, when you spot one of these rolling time capsules, you know exactly what it is. Because the 4104 doesn't try to blend in. It doesn't hide its age. It wears it like a badge. And that's part of its magic. In a world chasing the next new thing, the 4104 reminds us that lasting value isn't always about speed or style. Sometimes it's about staying power, about how a well-built machine can cross generations, reinvent itself, and still do what it was meant to do: bring people somewhere new. This wasn't just a bus. It was a legacy on wheels, and for many, it still is. The GM PD4104 was never built to dazzle, and maybe that's exactly why it mattered. It wasn't a headline chaser like the Scenicruiser, and it didn't flaunt futuristic flair. But in its quiet, reliable way, it carried a generation forward, mile after mile, town after town, with grace, grit, and a kind of dignity you don't often see anymore. For many, it wasn't just a bus. It was America in motion. Did you ever ride one? Spot one? Maybe you've dreamed of restoring one into your own rolling home. We'd love to hear your memories. Drop your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the machines that moved us, connected us, and still refuse to be forgotten. Because some legends don't need a spotlight. They just need a road.